Hello and welcome to today's UPS webinar on taking the mystery out of customs, the latest webinar in our Be Unstoppable series for small and medium-sized businesses. I'm Jimena Roth, Marketing Manager for the UPS U.S. International Business Unit, as well as your moderator for today's event. This webinar is a continuation of last month's Exports 101, Growing Beyond the Border webinar that can be found on ups.com/webinars. Today, I'm joined by three panelists who I'll be introducing in just a moment. But first, I'd like to start off with a couple of housekeeping items before getting started. First, this webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent out to all the registrants via email following the event. Feel free to share among your teams and colleagues. We certainly encourage you to do so. And second, we will take the final portion of today's webinar to address questions from our audience. So as we go, I encourage our audience members to submit your questions via chat so that we could address them during the Q&A portion if they were not already addressed. So today I am thrilled to present to you our panelists for today's discussion on customs. We've heard loud and clear from our SMB customers the need for education and knowledge on customs and trade compliance, and that's why we have our experts here today. Tammy Bilodeau is joining us from New Brunswick, Canada, where she serves as UPS Canada Vice President of Customs Brokerage and Compliance. As Canada is our #1 destination lane for exports here in the US, I'm particularly excited to have her share her experience and her expertise helping SMBs import into Canada. Welcome, Tammy. Next, we have Ken Krissinger, who joins us from Louisville, Kentucky, where he serves as the UPS Customs and Trade Compliance Manager. He'll discuss trends we're seeing in various regions around the world, as well as best practices for a smoother customs experience. Welcome, Ken. Finally, I'm delighted that Michael Bauer is joining us from London, England, where he serves as Head of Operations for Sherper, a door-to-door luggage shipping business, and he is a UPS customer. I'm excited for him to share his perspective on how issues of compliance are crucial to his business, especially as they expand their US operations. So we welcome you, Michael. I've asked our panelists to first share a brief overview of their respective areas, and then we'll move into a panel discussion to dig deeper. As a reminder, if you have questions, you can use the chat function to submit them. And so with that, I will pass it over to Ken. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar, and hopefully you'll find some useful information out of it. One item that we thought might be helpful to cover is from a U.S. export compliance perspective, what is actually required in most cases or instances to export a shipment from the United States. And one area we do receive a lot of questions on are, what is an AES system filing and when is it required? And in most cases, we refer to it internally as EEI, which is the automated export information or the data that is passed to census through the AES system. And just a very high level overview, the automated export system is a joint venture between Census, CBP, and Department of State to capture, some very particular export information that is required. And in most cases, any shipment with a single commodity valued over $2,500 in AES filing is required. If there's any licensing or permits, and in some cases, if there's an ECCN number associated with the commodity or it is related to the ITAR, a filing will be required as well. UPS does allow the customer to file directly. And in most cases, if you do that, you would pass the ITN or the internal transaction number along to UPS along with your shipment information. But if not, UPS does file on our customer's behalf as well. So our system is programmed to understand when a filing would be required. And in most cases, we can make that filing on your behalf with a simple POA or power of attorney that our customer-facing systems are programmed to print out and allow you to sign at the time that you generate your shipment. So again, in this case, AES would only be required for shipments over $2,500. A few questionable areas that we also get a lot of questions on Shipments to Puerto Rico are required to have a filing. So the filing requirements that you see here on the screen do also apply to Puerto Rico. They do not apply to approximately 99% of the shipments to Canada. So Canada and the United States share relevant trade data, so we do not require an AES filing, nor is it legislatively required to shipments between the United States and Canada, unless Canada is just a stopover to an ultimate other foreign destination. If you'd move on to the next screen, please. Also, another area where we do see a lot of confusion, and probably our number one holdup of exporting shipments from the United States is either incomplete or missing export information. We call it an invoice on this screen, but an invoice to us could also be an EDI interchange. So we do have quite a number of customers that are on paperless information, but we call it invoice information, whether you pass it to us electronically or actually give us a physical paper copy invoice to move along with your shipment as it moves through our processing for exportation. But obviously, probably the number one critical piece of information is a very clear description. And if you do have it, the HTS number that goes along with it, obviously the 6-digit is helpful, but if you have the full HTS number, anytime you may have that, it is extremely helpful if you pass it along to us. Also, as I mentioned on the previous screen, if an AES filing is required, we would need that information as well. So it does simplify our process if you pass along as much of the information as you can. Also, the country of origin and the value, it does not necessarily have to be in US dollars for US export, but we would need to know what country the value is in. So just very, very clear designations on all of that information is extremely helpful. Of course, valid shipper and consignee or receiver's name and address as well. So it seems like it may be very simple, but you would be surprised how many shipments we do have that do have problems with that. I did also mention that we receive invoice information electronically. There's certain times that if it passes all data validation, a human on the UPS side may not manipulate or see that data. So in some cases, if we receive poor information, we may also pass poor information along, which is going to possibly delay the shipment from exporting the United States. And if it does not delay it, it very well may delay it from customs clearance at the ultimate destination. So thank you. Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. And we will dive deeper. We're already getting questions in, but it is so important to have all this information. With that, you mentioned some things that I think Tammy will get into. So Tammy will go ahead and pass it on to you.
Great, thanks so much. And yeah, I'm super excited to be here. Ken, thanks for teeing things up, because all of those things that you mentioned are very important to us here in Canada as well for importation. So for those of you who don't know, UPS Canada Customs Brokerage is one of the largest brokers in Canada. And we assessed duties and taxes on over 10 million shipments in 2021. So needless to say, we've got a vast amount of experience in the clearance process through Canada Customs. That being said, it is the importer's choice on who will provide that customs clearance on their imports into Canada. The Canadian Border Services Agency, or CBSA, our customs regulators, require that customs brokers obtain a power of attorney, or POA, from the importer of record before clearing any shipments on their behalf. And that regulation applies to all commercial shipments and even casual shipments if they're valued in excess of $3,300 Canadian or are restricted regardless of value. So, as the shipper, unfortunately, you don't have any say on who's going to broker the shipment unless you've decided to become a non-resident importer and you yourself are the importer of record. I won't get into those details here just now, but certainly if you wanted more information on that, that would be discussions that we could further at another point. So all of this is important to understand because in Canada, all shipments coming from the US and Mexico that are greater than $40 Canadian require customs clearance. And that's referred to as the de minimis threshold. So $40 these days doesn't go very far. I'm sure we'd all agree. So that means the majority of shipments entering into Canada are going to require customs clearance, and if they are commercial, designation of a broker. And so going back to what Ken was talking about, it really is critical on your shipments coming to Canada that you provide complete and accurate information to avoid any customs delays or penalties and fines. So I've outlined here on the right-hand side of the screen some items that are key to provide, and I think Ken touched on some of these already. But certainly the commercial invoice, whether it's electronic or not, free trade agreements, if they're applicable, to save yourself some duties and taxes. Ken talked about the shipper and the consignee contact information, and you may be wondering why that's so important. And if you think about the fact that we do require authorization from the importer to clear the shipment through customs, you could understand why we need that consignee contact information. Otherwise, it immediately creates a stop-gap for us in the clearance process. A valid description, general description of the goods, regardless of the detail on the commercial invoice, a realistic value, and as Ken said, the HTS code, if you can provide that. So that's a really quick overview, but I certainly look forward to discussing this more during the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Tammy. I'm hearing a lot of the importance of providing comprehensive information, so we'll certainly dive deeper into that. But now I'd like to turn it over to Michael and have you introduce yourself and your business and give us a great overview.
Thank you very much. Well, before we go into anything customs related, I thought it would be appropriate just to give some background around who I am and who Sherpa is. I'm Michael Bauer, Head of Operations at Sherpa Global, and it's really wonderful to be able to come here and tell our story and hopefully give some support to you on the journey that you're going to be going on. I've worked at fantastic organizations over the past years, having lived in 4 different countries, been exposed to a wide range of business environments, but I've always found my home in supply chain operations. Recently, I was Director of Operations at Targus EMEA, after which I moved to Amazon, where I worked on a few amazing FC launches and also ran a couple of the external FCs within the UK. Now I've joined Sherpa, where I'm responsible for global operations. Now, normally I'd love to get some feedback, and I can't hear or see you guys. But you know, it would have been really nice to get, as I say, it would be really nice to get some feedbacks, because, you know, all of us at some point are traveling and we have issues or problems when we moving luggage, golf clubs, bikes through the airports or on trains or even in vehicles. And, you know, the frustration alone in checking in luggage can be overwhelming. And when we talk about excess baggage fees, the conversation actually gets really interesting for us. And this is where really Sherpa was born. Our founder, Andrew Watson, was one of the first employees at Spotify, believe it or not. And he spotted a gap in the market. Having lived on 3 continents himself, continually pulling luggage around from country to country, he thought that there must be a simpler solution. And now, having launched in the UK, we operate also within the United States and the United Arab Emirates, where we have a hub model. I think there's something got to do with all the word united. At Sherpa, we offer a no-hassle door-to-door solution for shipping luggage, boxes, golf clubs, bikes, as well as focusing on relocation of students moving from universities and moving to universities and home. You know, there's masses of consumers out there that are looking for alternatives to carrying luggage with them. And when it comes to excess baggage orders, we found that our customers love our service. Not only do we remove that hassle, but we're also able to compete with the airlines in price. And we've recently seen prices with airlines, specifically on baggage handling, increasing, which is working in our favor. So for us personally, it's a no-brainer, price comparable, and no hassle door-to-door solutions. Now, we probably will all agree that operations isn't rocket science, but we do have to consider really complex processes, from order entry, connectivity to warehousing, courier networks, various physical information and communication flows. We're primarily people dependent. I spend a lot of my time focusing on connecting with my team and customers to understand the pain points and drive improvements that reduce waste and streamline process. And one of the key drivers in the cycle is, of course, customs compliance and regulations. As a company, we ship globally, and customs is specific to each international destination. So we spend a lot of time focusing on this element. We're a startup, we're small, so we also have to be very mindful of the time it takes to keep on top of all the country-specific requirements. So our strategy has been really clear, and that's to focus on the key markets representing the majority of our business to ensure that we understand that granular detail. And this has really helped us immensely in providing the right information to our customers. You've also had to be fairly cautious, as our business model is not one where we're offering DDP services, but rather DDU or DAP, where the customer is responsible for the customs payment. So we have to we're going to be really clear and really clear in terms of the information that we provide to the customer. It needs to be accurate, and it needs to support that process from start to finish. Having launched in the US, but being a UK-based company, we've also had to lean on the expertise, specifically of UPS, to support us on that journey within the States. And while we've been fortunate to have really knowledgeable internal expertise, we do seek that external advice where the gaps exist. Now, we're planning to grow, and we're super excited about our future, looking at the existing markets and also focusing on some new opportunities. One of our primary markets that we want to focus on at the moment is the States. We see fantastic growth over the last 5 months, and we're really excited to see what the next year holds for us. So thanks very much for listening to me, and I look forward to some questions during Q&A. If we quickly move to the next slide, just a couple more seconds. We did have we've created a discount code for this webinar. So if you would like to test our solution out, please feel free to use the discount code, where we're offering 10% on all shipments. And if you've got any questions whatsoever, please reach out to myself or my team. Details all online. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. And we love promoting our customers, and so we're excited to share this with the webinar audience. I love the business model. I think it's a really interesting one, a very valuable one. And so certainly give it a try. If you haven't heard of this company or have a need, especially now as travel is picking up, we highly encourage you to test them out. All right. Thank you so much. So now we are going to go ahead and pivot into a time of panel discussion. I have some follow-up questions. Let's dig a little deeper. And then I don't need to remind this audience to send in your questions, because I've been seeing them come through. We'll get to that in about 20 minutes. But right now, I want to start going back to Ken and then Tammy afterwards, kind of backing up from the information a little bit that you provided. Can you tell us more about really what do our customers need to really ensure a more smoother customs experience? And kind of similar to that, what are the common pitfalls that you see most from the shipper side when it comes to customs? So Ken, and then Tammy, if you can add afterwards.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Some of that, I think, pivots back to what we had talked about earlier with the documentation. And I know in working with U.S. Customs specifically and international, I do work with our global counterparts, throughout the globe, is typically the first question that comes up, especially with e-commerce as large as it is customs oftentimes is looking to substantiate the value that has been disclosed on the invoices. So certainly having a way to validate the value that has been declared, I think we see a lot of undervaluation. Again, especially, e-commerce is very booming right now and the volumes are tremendous. So I know customs is focusing a lot on proper validation and valuation, obviously because it does impact the import duties and taxes and the clearance process at destination. So I certainly think making certain that you have what appears to be a realistic value, and if not, if it's transfer or sale value that's different than possibly a sale value within country, just being certain that that's clearly documented and can be substantiated. I think it's also very relevant to understand your products and what you are in fact selling, and specifically with global transportation, if there are any types of controls that may be around those products, from a U.S. export perspective, if they're dual use commodities that may require licenses or other type of other agency approvals for export. That certainly applies to more strategic goods like aircraft parts, but certainly understand that there may be other controls around certain products if they do in fact have dual use nature. And I think at the end of the material, we do have some helpful links that may help if you do have a product that may apply. And then I think lastly, continuing to screen your transactions. UPS spends a lot of time, and I know our competitors do as well, as we're required to do a lot of screening on all the parties that we do see. So if you have a question about a transaction, you can certainly screen the parties against export.gov to see if by chance it is a denied party or a denied entity that you may be working with. So if you ever do question that, UPS does have tools that will screen that on the front end for our customers, but you can also do it free of charge well before you ever give the shipment to UPS. So export.gov is a very, very good tool that we reference a lot to our U.S. export customers that can provide a lot of helpful information to you. So I think beyond that, that's probably the biggest tips that I might have, and I'm sure Tammy has some very helpful ones as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ken, valuation was one that came to mind for me also. So absolutely, we see the same thing on the import side if the appropriate value has not been provided. So I'd echo your thoughts on that, Ken. Valuation is definitely key. The other thing that I would say is customs, at least CBSA, has gotten much more savvy in data analytics than they ever have before. And one of the common things that we've been seeing, kind of a recent trend, is an increase in inspections and or penalties for not providing an adequate general description of the goods that are coming across the border. So Ken and I both have talked a lot about the commercial invoice and the importance of that. But in addition to that, even in the shipping platforms or when you're creating your shipment, typically you're asked to provide a general shipment description of what is in that package. And that information is what's passed from the carrier to the customs organization for risk screening. And, we see lots of examples in our network where, the shipper has indicated that it's products, they've indicated a product number, medicine is a common one, general merchandise. And those are all things that will flag customs to either stop your shipment or, as I said, assess a penalty. So there is a detailed commodity description reference on the cbsa.gc.ca site that outlines that. But generally speaking, you just need to provide a common sense, logical description that gives customs the opportunity to risk assess those goods coming in. So that's very key, especially right now. It's something that they're definitely focused on.
I'd probably add to that. That's one of the, I'd say, the issues, but one of the areas that we also do focus on is the detailed pack lists or pro forma invoices, depending on the specific formats. And we have a lot of discussions around prohibited items to ensure that we don't get stuck into a position where product is getting stuck at customs and either being disposed of, returned, or excessive duties are being applied to that. So it's definitely a really good call out.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So I'm going to pivot a little bit, and Michael, to you. Can you tell us more about the customs journey? So you gave us a great overview of the business. What have you learned along the way? Some more of your learnings as a business exporting specifically from the U.S. as you expand.
Yeah. Well, we launched in the US in January of this year. So it's been 5 months now, and we've really grown quite nicely, which really has been quite impressive. And as I mentioned earlier, though, our focus is really understanding that granular detail when it comes to our core markets, specifically export from the US. And I'll probably keep talking about this over and over again, because we need to ensure that we have and we offer that seamless solution to our customers, and that experience is really, really important to us. You know, our business model might be a little bit different from a lot of people that are joining this particular webinar, but it's absolutely essential for us to get down to the detail, because we need to support the customer to understand what's required to clear customs. In terms of our learnings, what we found is, the country-specific regulations, requirements can change at times. So you constantly have to be quite robust in terms of updating your systems. We've got a functionality that we've recently launched where the customer can automatically upload the necessary documents for that destination to make the process a bit smoother. We then communicate that with the courier, UPS, so that you've got all that information to clear customs on our behalf. It is difficult, and it's a continuously changing picture, and it just feels like customs is an area outside of the span of control of the business. And again, it's just about staying up to date, making sure that you go into your resource points, and just staying calm and carrying on.
Nice. And I'm going to go ahead and follow up. What are some of those resources and go-to points for you?
Well, good question. Well, the tools that we find on courier sites are really useful. There is an inordinate amount of information that's around. Just need to get out there and access it. What we've also found is with specific orders where there is an issue, we get in touch with the courier clearing agents. And as we are a new business launching into new areas, this has really been helping us to capture those exceptions, if I may call them that. And we pull on that experience for any future references. Now, internally, we've also got customs experts with years of experience. Definitely do advise to some level, if it's not outsourced, is to look at in-house experience, not only just to have someone there, but it's to keep in touch with that information, making sure that we're always keeping up to date with everything necessary. And I mean, for the market that we're in, there's quite a few competitors out there. So we do a lot of competitive research and looking at the resources across our industry, ensuring that we are feeding back that correct information and having very transparent, open discussions again with our courier partners, globally. And there are cases, though, where we can't find the necessary information, and then we do seek external advice. And that's in the case where we obviously can't close those gaps.
Thank you. Tammy, I'm actually going to bring it back to you and dig deeper into Canada. Maybe a lot of folks already know the importance of Canada as a U.S. businesses, but for those that don't, can you tell us why it's important for them to really consider Canada in their export strategy, and what else do they need to know? And I'll go ahead and ask the question since you put the bait out there. Can you get into non-resident importer? We can cover that a little bit now.
All right. Well, I mean, obviously Canada is the US's largest and closest trading partner. So although, you know, there are some certain cultural differences, I'd say obviously we're very similar in terms of market demand for commodities. So to me, if you're looking to expand internationally, Canada is the obvious choice to start with, at least. So, you know, first of all, I'd say, remember what we talked about with respect to the fact that Canada has a very low de minimis, which again means that anything valued over $40 Canadian will have taxes owing, and anything over $150 will have duty and taxes owing. So that ultimately is the responsibility of the importer of record in Canada to pay to the CBSA. So with respect to a non-resident importer, so U.S. shippers can choose to become the importer of record by opening a non-resident import account. So there's some additional information that's required to agree to maintain books and records outside of Canada, obviously accounting for the duties and taxes that are owing to customs. But typically your broker obviously pays those and assesses those on your behalf and bills you back. Why I think that model makes sense is because it really creates a seamless transaction to your importer. You know, they receive their goods, there's no additional monies owing. It's really a seamless transaction. So if you're looking to create the most frictionless customer experience for your customers in Canada, then I would definitely recommend you consider the non-resident import model. Now, again, obviously, we're not going to have time to go into all the pros and cons here today, but I'll certainly put that out there for consideration. And your sales representative or myself and my team can help you explore that further if need be. And I'm sure all of our contact information will be made available through the webinar. You know, the average Canadian consumer, if you're selling B2C, doesn't understand customs regulations and the need to pay duties and taxes. So if you're in the e-com space as a seller, the easier you make the customer experience, the better it's going to be. So again, ideally, you want to take care of the duties and taxes, in my opinion, so that there are no surprises for your customer. So whether you choose to be a non-resident importer or you choose a DDP Incoterm so that the customs broker bills those charges back to you, both of those solutions can offer a seamless experience for the e-commerce customer.
That is fantastic. And just for those who may not have heard DDP before, that's delivery duty paid versus DDU that Michael had mentioned, delivery duty unpaid. And we do at UPS have some interesting findings through a study on SMBs that just, I think, Tammy, to your point, how many actual businesses offered DDU over DDP, and it was the large majority, or certainly more than half were offering DDU, versus what the consumers actually wanted, which was that no surprise, you know, DDP over DDU. So we see that gap there. We can, and I'll talk a little bit in a moment about how we can perhaps help you with that on that journey, but agreed about the customer experience. Thank you so much. Ken, I want to pass it to you. What are the current trends that you're seeing as it relates to customs in different parts of the world? I don't know if you can give us maybe the hot regions and the summary of what you're seeing, but would love to hear from you on that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good subject. And probably the first one that comes to mind, I shouldn't say the first one, what we're seeing globally is customs is requiring more information earlier. And a very good example is there is a customs modernization going on within Europe, and I believe it's called ICS. And as part of ICS2, they're going to require the carrier to submit the HTS number as part of the manifest, 6-digit HTS number. So not the full classification, but at least the first 6 digits. What that entails, I believe that goes in 2023. So what that means is we're going to have to mandate that we at least have that available before the goods depart their foreign origin, as it is now part of the manifest requirement, which UPS and most other carriers, well, it's mandated that it is electronic. So we electronically file our manifest information. In most cases, we file it pre-departure. So that puts a lot of strain on the information we have to collect on the front end that right now, to be quite honest, I would assume most operators collect that information after the goods have arrived, or they at least use part of the transit time to get reliable, valid information and pass it along to customs. As they push that back and make it electronic and make it earlier, it obviously is going to reduce our tolerance levels of, potentially where we have questionable shipments or where we lack that information. It may most likely will begin to impact the transit time and delay those packages. I will say some areas of the world we would welcome some electronic activity. And I know from our perspective, we're working with certain governments in South America that still rely entirely on paper and blue signatures and ink on invoices. And it's, as you might imagine, it's very difficult to keep up with all of what's globally required by every customs agency that we deal with. So our public affairs team, and I know other transportation providers' public affairs teams are also deeply involved, but we're also working on legislatively changing those requirements in some of those countries so that they do introduce more advanced electronic information where it will allow us to have a more seamless transaction to our customers, to be able to offer more areas where we do not have to have the true paper invoice with a signature on it, and we can move to a more modern paperless environment. So there's probably 3 areas that I'm thinking of where we're going to see some major changes, and one is Europe, and then hopefully, we're successful in South and Central America changing some of their customs requirements that have been in place for many, many years. And I hate to say the pandemic has been helpful in those cases, but it did bring to light some issues, and it allowed customs to kind of open their eyes and understand that their requirements are quite antiquated when we have people working from home and their own employees, weren't able to come to work necessarily every single day. So we did use the pandemic as kind of a springboard to start those discussions again with various customs agencies in many of the global regions that we operate to lobby for change. And obviously our customers will benefit from that, as will other, it's not just a UPS issue. It's really a cross-border trade issue that needs to be fixed. So, we've got our irons in a lot of areas that I think some are very beneficial and some may be problematic, when we start having to have greater additional information earlier in the process.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And so I'm going to really provide this one to actually Michael. We'll come back to you. And I know we have a few minutes before we start taking the Q&A from the audience. But Michael, we'd love to hear a little bit more how UPS has helped your business along the exports and customs journey. How specifically?
Sure. Well, being new, and as I said earlier, we didn't have that expertise in the market. We've formed formed a really good relationship with UPS, and you guys have supported us, enabled us in the market by providing the customs expertise, which is really great. I think one example that comes to mind is exporting to Australia and New Zealand. And our account manager, Joe, who really was on the ball. We had a couple of orders coming in and we hadn't yet prepared for those exports. and he worked tirelessly really to support us in terms of setting up that necessary infrastructure to facilitate those continuous movements to those markets. And since we've actually done that, it's one of our primary markets from a luggage personal effects point of view, and we've seen next to no issues with those movements. And one other area, which I must say really does help us, is the communication that we do have with the customs team when issues arise, and say 9 times out of 10, 9.5 times out of 10, we kept up to date. We understand what those issues are, what the mitigations that need to be put into place to ensure that we can get our orders to our customers. Again, for us, it's all about customer experience and making sure that we get that quick turnaround. So it's been, it really has been a good experience up to now. And hopefully that continues into the future with UPS and the team.
Wonderful. Last question for you, Michael. What is the most important piece of advice you would give our audience? It could just be one.
Just one. In that case, I'll give you 2.
I like it. Go for it.
The first one that comes to mind is focusing on those key export markets first. You know, understand those key requirements, and if not outsourced, have a resource in place, whether it's yourself or it's a part-time, but definitely designate someone in the organization to keep up to date with potential changes that constantly happen. I mean, those changes do need to be filtered down through the organization, through ERPs, through manual interfaces, whatever they may be. I think that's really the first advice that I would give. And then the second, knowing a large portion of this audience and hearing also the other panel experts, is if you are sending commercial items, really do understand those commodity codes and the duty rates that are applicable, because they will obviously impact on landed cost.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And similarly to Ken versus Tammy, what is the most important point or takeaway that our audience member, that you would give to our audience members at this point? Ken.
I know I was looking through some of the questions, and I know that there's a lot of questions that are out there, and that shipping internationally can be confusing. I think my advice would be, certainly don't be afraid to start asking those questions. UPS has a lot of, the industry has a lot of transportation professionals that can certainly help. And the last thing we want is to see someone not be able to penetrate a market because they have too many questions about, or have questions that are difficult to answer online. We've all been online and done some searching, and sometimes it can be difficult to get the right answer. I would say that's the time, especially if, it's important to your business, to pick up the phone and maybe ask for your UPS rep to come out and help you navigate things, because there's so many professionals in the industry, like I said, that can help. And again, it's not a UPS sales pitch at all. It's just, that's what we do for a living, and we certainly have people that can help you. So don't ever be afraid to ask for help.
Absolutely. And we'll have more information on that towards the end. Tammy, top takeaway from you.
I guess just, again, provide complete and accurate detail when shipping internationally. The old saying, haste makes waste, definitely applies here. So.
Yes, thank you. And real quick, before we get into the official question and answer, I do want to bring to mind, I'm not sure how many of our audience members already know this, but as of last year, UPS now has the functionality that we offer to our customers for that total cost transparency for your end consumers as well. And so we talk about those duties and taxes, those brokerage fees, and through our enhanced web shipping services on ups.com, as well as now through 2 UPS cross-border APIs, we offer estimated duties and taxes and brokerage fees to be able to integrate into your website. And so we have that through a new landed cost quoting API, and that gives you the estimates during the shopping or at the checkout time, or through the enhanced shipping API, which allows you to view those estimates at checkout and shipping. And so these are at no extra cost to our customers. You can get them on ups.com under our developer kit for our APIs and download either the landed cost quoting API or the shipping API, or both, depending on the needs of your business. It also offers some predictions using the HTS prediction services. So if you're not sure what your code is, we have a database to draw from. So we talk about that accurate general description, then being able to be transferred to a code. So again, on ups.com under our developer kit for APIs. So now we're going to go ahead and attack some of the questions. We won't be able to get to all of them, but we do want to answer as much as we can. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Ken to tackle the first one. Can you give us what is the difference between an HS code and an HTS code? And if somebody doesn't have that code, how can they find it?
That's a very good question. HTS codes are used for U.S. export purposes only, and I believe I've got some folks that would know the answer off the top of their head, but there's a few hundred that only apply for U.S. export. So in most cases, they should be very close to the same, but in some cases, there may be slight differences. So from a U.S. export perspective, the HTS code should work, but then there's also a lookup to convert it over to the HS or the harmonized code. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. There is a website to look them up.
So there are guidelines. Sorry, Ken, I was just going to say, I mean, they can go to the US CBP site. You can find harmonized tariff schedules there for the US specifically. Canada Customs has a similar site for Canada Customs. And just to add on to what Ken said, the first 6 digits of the HTS code are international, and the last 4 are going to be specific to the country that the goods are being imported into. So as Ken said, for some goods, there are US export requirements, but then the goods have to transcend the border, and then there are that country's import requirements. The first 6 digits should typically be the same. And then UPS, of course, as we mentioned, we have the tradability or the APIs on the ups.com site now that also can assist you in entering in your description to come up with a suggested HTS classification based on the information that you provide.
Thank you. And Tammy, this one's for you. This person writes, we send 95% of our shipments to Canada via DDP. Does our import customer still need a customs broker in these cases?
So the answer to that depends on who you're shipping to. So if you recall, I talked about commercial shipments versus B2C shipments. If it's a B2C, an e-com B2C shipment, then as long as the goods are less than $3,300 Canadian, you won't need a customs broker designated. UPS, if you're shipping via UPS, will be able to do the clearance on the importer's behalf. But if it is going to a commercial business, that business, regardless of who's paying for the charges, has to provide UPS authorization to clear the shipment if they don't already have an import account with us. So hopefully that was clear. Thank you.
Yes, and so here's another one. If we export equipment, that is physically made in China, but the software inside was designed and added in the USA, can we list the USA as the country of origin if we can defend that more than 50% of the value came from the USA?
Ken, do you want to take that one, or do you want me to? Ben.
From a U.S. export perspective, if it's more than 50%, then yes, you would declare U.S. and China both.
And
But if it's
the
more than
rules of
50%,
origin,
then it would be U.S. origin.
yeah. So, I mean, the rules of origin are outlined very specifically depending on the trade agreement that that you're looking to apply. So those rules of origin criteria, again, you know, that's information that we could supply certainly on a more detailed basis based on your commodity.
And I will let the audience know that we will provide a one-sheet summary with resources that we've talked about here, as well as potentially a few others that we haven't. And so that will certainly be one of them. Another question: what shipments or to which countries need an EORI number, and how do you get one? I'm not sure if either.
Ken, that's on the export side, I think.
Yeah, I'm thinking I don't have a listing myself, so we might have to research that one and see what information we have.
All right. Yep. And we'll get back to all of these questions if we can't answer them today. Tammy, can one not choose to select a broker for a resident importer?
So the shipper cannot, no. So the importer of record, so the person either receiving the goods, or in case of a non-resident importer, those are the only folks that can determine who the broker will be. So just as the shipper saying, you know what, my customer up in Canada uses UPS, we can't take that for granted. We have to, if we don't have a power of attorney on file for the importer of record, we have to make contact with them to request or, turn the information over to their own broker. So it really, I mean, we have a vast database of importers in Canada who we already know who their broker is, whether that's UPS or any other broker, and, that goes through automatically. But for anyone who doesn't have a broker on file with UPS, we'll have to contact them to determine that.
Okay, thank you. Ken, can we ship DDP to Mexico without a broker in Mexico?
I don't believe so. I think you always have to have broker representation specific. Tammy, you may know, but I think specifically Mexico as well. I don't believe you can self-represent clearance.
Yeah, there would have to be a broker designated. I'm not sure, though, exactly what the import process is to obtain that broker information in Mexico.
And UPS does have a presence there, so based off valuation and de minimis, we would begin the clearance process. But like Tammy said, locally, they would still have their operational process to determine how to clear a package. But I'm not sure. I've not heard that you can self-clear in Mexico, specifically in Express or our small package service, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Ken, back to you. For items going to U.S. territories, such as Puerto Rico or Guam, are there duties and taxes assessed for those destinations?
Puerto Rico had the hacienda tax, which is a little bit different. I believe that's now self-filed locally. So as the transportation provider, we don't see anything on behalf of the customer that we pay. And I believe it's the same in Guam, but I would have to research that one as well. Right. I've not heard of duties and taxes in Guam, but I'm not 100% sure. So I don't want to answer it without doing some research.
Okay. And Tammy, what is the latest on CARM, which we did not even dig deep into, but we will have as part of our resource page. But and kind of backing up, can you give a very high level overview on CARM with really just what's the latest?
Sure. Okay. Well, I mean, for the audience that may not be aware, CARM is the CBSA, which is our customs regulator assessment and revenue management initiative. It was originally scheduled to be implemented in May of 2022. for the final release. That's been pushed back now and delayed. So CBSA is recommended and estimated that it will not be effective until May or October of 2023. So CARM is going to impact all commercial importers in Canada. All commercial importers are going to need to be registered on the CARM client portal, which is a CBSA-owned portal, and they'll need to delegate authority to their customs broker to act on their behalf, and they're going to have their own surety bond or their own security with customs. I just want to note that CARM doesn't impact B2C. So if you're an e-com B2C shipper, it really isn't going to have any impact on you or your customer at all. But why does it matter to you as a shipper? Well, if you are a non-resident importer, you would be considered a commercial importer, and therefore this would impact you, and all those things I talked about would have to happen. If you're not a non-resident importer, you just need to be aware that if you are shipping to businesses in Canada, once CARM goes live, if your customer as a commercial importer is not registered on the CARM client portal, or they do not have the security in place, it could impact the release of their shipment and hence the delivery of the shipment. So that's kind of CARM in a nutshell, and why it might matter to the folks on this call.
And again on that resource page.
Though.
I'm sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
I said, but we don't have to worry now till 2023 at least.
Correct. Yes, but we definitely have other webinars that dive deeper into the matter, and we will provide that information afterwards. Unfortunately, we are almost at time, so I knew we couldn't get through all the questions, but again, we will be sending out post communications with additional details. But I just want to go ahead and say that we hope this has been informative. There were a lot of questions covered. Obviously, customs is not a simple topic, but we do hope that we took some more of the mystery out of it for sure as you look to grow your business globally. And so we will follow up on these top questions. And I just want to draw your attention right now, though, to some of our resources for you, as well as remind you that there will be a post-event communication. So we do have a UPS U.S. Export Success Bundle. If you go to ups.com/go global, and you can find anything from simple, which international services do we provide, to further information on customs and trade compliance. Also, if you would like to take the next step and speak with a UPS solutions expert on your own global business strategy, please do schedule a free 15-minute virtual consultation at ups.com/consultation. And finally, for more exporting, e-commerce, supply chain optimization, and other topics, you can check out ups.com/webinars. So we do want to thank you for taking the time today to join us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next UPS Be Unstoppable webinar. We hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Bye.